So thank you, good morning to you all, and thank you, Archbishop Jurkovič, for your kind words of introduction, for inviting me to this UN building, and for asking me to participate as a panelist in this event. I'd like to thank you also for trying to go the Ghanaian way, to tell my name Kodwo as it was in Ghana. There are a couple of Ghanaians here, you know, Kodwo means I was born on Monday. Since we take our first name from the weekday on which we born. And so, you know, all of you know Kofi Annan, so he was a Friday born. And so on. As for the Turkson, it's a corruption of a Ghanaian name, which is actually Techisam, which our contact with England transformed into Turkson. And so I carry that as a virtue or as a burden. But very, very honored to be here this morning in your midst to share thoughts on integral human development with you, especially in the way that it synchronizes with the UN development goals and, as it were, Church's way of partnering with the UN on the achievement and realization of the development goals. So let me first bring you greetings from the Holy See and to thank the organizers and all who are attending this special event. In particular, I'm grateful to the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Mr. Mukhisa KITUYI, and International Geneva for co-organizing this special event on integral human development, transforming our world, the Holy See, and the 2030 Agenda. It is in particular a great pleasure for me to return to Geneva to share some considerations of the Holy See on the Sustainable Development Goals. The last time I was here was to talk about Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical on the environment and climate change. So, dear friends, as you may remember, just last July in Nairobi, at UNCTAD's mandate, was renewed with a strong focus on building an inclusive economy. In fact, the political declaration issued by the conference, Nairobi Azimio, noted that the world still faces an unequal global distribution of resources and opportunities. But today, we're better placed to take concrete action that can address the inequalities between and among countries and peoples. In 2015, world leaders agreed on how to better position the international community to address some of the most pressing global challenges. These agreements and outcomes collectively offer a blueprint for how the global economy, global society, and environment should look like in 2030. Sustainable development is unthinkable without inclusive prosperity, and that is prosperity for all. And as Pope Francis, just referred to by our first speaker, said in 2015 during his visit to the United Nations office in New York, that the SDGs provide a very hopeful sign of inclusive prosperity and development. In his address to the United Nations General Assembly, Pope Francis stated that the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an important sign of hope. A solemn commitments, however, are not enough, although they are certainly a necessary step towards solutions. Our world demands of all government leaders a will which is effective, practical, and constant. Concrete steps and immediate measures, then, for preserving and improving the natural environment, and thus putting an end as quickly as possible to the phenomenon of social and economic exclusion. The Holy See believes that this hope will be realized only if the agenda is truly, fairly, and effectively implemented. So, during the last 15 years, globalization has given evidence of its challenges and limits, and in a certain sense, it's become, as is just been recalled also by Mr. KITUYI, it's become a victim of its own success. In fact, while allowing for a general improvement of living conditions, it has created also a large number of losers alongside winners. This is reflected in the widening gap of inequality, particularly within emerging and advanced economies. And Oxfam has reported and reminded us of this twice at Davos at the World Economic Forum, how much the wealth of the world is concentrated in the hands of barely 1%, with the resources of 10%, 90% handled by 10. So over the last 15 years, the conditions of many people living in poverty or near poverty has deteriorated as a result of processes that have displaced their livelihoods and thus severely impaired their ability to make a decent living. These processes include environmental degradation, violent conflicts, forced migration, rapid fluctuations in the prices of commodities and agricultural products, stranded resources and natural disasters resulting from climate change, as well as cyclical political and economic crisis. The loss of benefits like insurance and pensions formerly associated with employment in the high and middle income world has further magnified the uncertainty and precariousness now faced by the middle class. In our globally interconnected world, people living in poverty are keenly aware from their exposure to mass and social media that their well-being is often determined by decisions of leaders and policymakers whom they have very little opportunity to influence. Such an individualistic economic ideology, an economy of exclusion and inequality, is anchored on a belief in the natural selfishness of the human being and the automatic ability of a free market, unhindered by moral regulations to generate increased efficiency and aggregate growth. This ideology describes the future not in terms of uncertainty, but in terms of risk, based on probability. The consequences of any action may be rationally assessed, and all come down to utility maximization. We learned through the crisis that in real life, the future is unknown. It is often shaped by actions based on incomplete or deliberately false information and even irresponsible speculation, which often produce unintended and unexpected consequences. When the consequences of specific decisions and actions are uncertain, then reason demands that moral and prudential criteria be included in the regulatory process. And so the lessons of the global financial crisis have not been assimilated, and we learn in all too slowly the lessons of environmental deterioration. Some circles maintain that current economics and technology will solve all the environmental problems. Yet, by itself, the market cannot guarantee integral human development and social inclusion. And so at the same time, we have a sort of super development of a wasteful and consumerist kind, which forms an unacceptable contrast with the ongoing situation of dishumanizing deprivation. While we are all too slow in developing economic institutions and social initiatives which can give the poor regular access to basic resources. And so, as it was stated in the Nairobi Azimio Declaration of the 14th UNCTAD Conference, economic activities should be at the service of persons. And any development and growth strategy should aim at the promotion of every human being and at the primacy of human work. In other terms, this has been stated and formulated as economic policy should serve the human person, but the human person should not be reduced to serve any economic structures and systems. The commitment then to a more integrated, comprehensive, and transformative and sustainable approach to development played a key role in the adoption of the 17 goals and targets for policymakers across all the levels of political organization. The 17 goals and multiple targets have clearly demonstrated a level of aspiration and ambition well beyond the Millennium Development Goals. And the principle of the common good, to which every aspect of social life must be related if it is to attain its fullest meaning, stems from the dignity, the unity, and equality of all people. This, for us, or for the Holy See, is been based on its belief in the common origins of the human race or human being. Having a common origin, and which makes all of humankind brothers or sisters in that sense, meaning and describing for all the same dignity, it's become the thing then that the affirmation of the common good is something that responds to the common dignity that all of humankind or every human person shares in and has. According to its primary and boldly accepted sense, the common good then is the sum total of all conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. The resulting rights and obligations are consequently the concern of the entire human race. Every group must take into account the needs and the legitimate aspirations of every other group and even those of the human family as a whole. The common good, then, should be understood not as the good of the abstract collectivity or of the state, nor merely as the mixture of goods of individual members, but rather as the good of every person, both as an individual and as a social being in relation to others. The common good, then, does not exist only on the level of state or of a nation, however, but at the level of every human group or community. Human beings, then, are not necessarily self-centered individuals geared towards maximizing their own utility and satisfaction, unmoved by others whom they consider only as trading partners. Human beings are persons, each of whom becomes fully himself or herself through relationship with other human beings, autonomous but not independent from others. Human beings, then, are characterized essentially by two features: by their dignity and by the fact that they are created for coexistence and to live and to mature in relationship with others. So through the 2030 agenda, the international community is choosing solidarity over egoism, solidarity with the excluded of today, solidarity with the poor of tomorrow, solidarity with future generations. The family, the natural and fundamental unit of society, is a primary agent of sustainable development. And therefore, the model of communion and solidarity among nations and international institutions is the thing to go for and to prefer. A shared concern then for the family and its members is a proven contributor to poverty reduction, better outcomes for children, equality between girls and boys, women and men, as well as improved balance of work, family, and rest component and relations, and stronger intra- and intergenerational bonds. In practical terms, then, the Holy See views life with dignity as including religious freedom and education, as well as lodging, labor, land, food, water, and health care. When Pope Francis arrived in the Vatican, from his Latin American background, he encouraged our office to organize an event for so-called popular movements made up of campesinos, cartoneros, and people, the landless people in Latin America. And when we did organize that event, the event decided to adopt three expressions as its key targets: trabajo, tierra, and techos. Land, work, and a roof over the head. And that's what we set ourselves to discussing with other grassroots and popular movements. Subsequently, last February, we were invited to the Central Valley in California to organize a similar meeting for the grassroots movements in the United States. 3 bishops from Canada who attended that event extended an invitation, so inviting us to bring this also to Canada. So I think we're making our way around the world to promote the threefold ideas and values of tierra, trabajo, and techo. Land, work, and a roof over the head as the basic concerns of the poor and the landless people in our midst. In the words of Pope Francis, then, we cannot call any society healthy when it does not leave room, real room for family life. We cannot think that a society has a future when it fails to pass laws capable of protecting families and ensuring their basic needs. And so in the context of a family life, the Holy See acknowledges that women have a special role to play in the family and in society, and in specific regard to integral human development per se. And this is due to their unique presence in the creation of life as physical and spiritual mothers who have special but not exclusive gifts that include defending, nurturing, and caring for life from conception until its natural death. The Holy See then believes that religious freedom shapes the way we interact socially and personally with our neighbor whose religious views differ from our own. And interreligious dialogue then permits us to speak to one another instead of taking up arms and opposing one another. Taking into consideration the ongoing atrocities against Christians and other religious minorities, the Holy See maintains that issues relating to religious freedom per se and freedom of conscience, as well as interreligious and intra-religious dialogue, must be given priority for the ultimate success of the 2030 agenda. Just as peaceful situation must also be promoted if the 2030 agenda is to succeed. The Holy See indeed thinks that more than the lack of finances, it is the lack of a peaceful environment that constitutes the greatest threat to the realization of the 2030 agenda. For if, as Pope Paul VI said, if the new name of peace is development, then development on its part also requires a peaceful environment for it to take root and to be realized. So we must all be part of the story, part of the solution to accessible, affordable care for these vulnerable brothers and sisters. If we look, for example, towards the third Sustainable Development Goal as a guide, we find a call to attain healthy lives for all at all ages. We must address maternal and child health, epidemics of AIDS, TB, malaria, neglected tropical diseases, hepatitis, waterborne diseases, and other communicable diseases, and reducing non-communicable diseases in order to meet the goal. Therefore, we believe that all must be part of the story, including pharmaceutical and diagnostic companies, as we strive to fulfill the moral imperative to increase access to health, product development, diagnostics, vaccines, and medicines, affordable pricing, and delivery systems, thus expanding access to pharmaceuticals for all people who need them, but especially children and our poorest and most marginalized brothers and sisters throughout the world. It would be irresponsible from the point of view of the Holy See to ignore the situation of mass migratory movement, and in particular the vulnerability of forced migrants, in a presentation that focuses on the projected achievement of the 2030 agenda. As this audience would be well aware, the SDGs contain a migration-specific target, namely 10.7, which calls on countries to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. Second, there are several migration-related targets, including those projected efforts to train and retrain health workers in developing countries and other measures to mitigate the brain drain, to provide scholarship for study abroad, to end human trafficking, and to respect labor rights of migrant workers, in particular women, and to reduce the cost of transferring remittances, and to provide legal identity for all, including through birth registrations. In this context, then, Pope Francis has joined other religious leaders in appealing for better governance of migration and protection of those migrants who desperately need solidarity of both governments and civil society. He recognizes, however, that such measures can only be achievable under the following condition: a change of attitude towards migrants and refugees is needed on the part of everyone, moving away from attitudes of defensiveness and fear, indifference and marginalization, all typical of a throwaway culture, towards attitudes based on a culture of encounter, culture of dialogue, the only culture capable of building a better, more just, and a fraternal world. In conclusion, then, Your Excellencies and my brothers and my friends, brothers and sisters, Pope Francis has urged the entire international community to persevere on this path in a spirit of more effective solidarity, and in the hope that it will ensure that special attention is paid to those who are most vulnerable. And as he declared during the November 2015 address, this is a path which seeks to attain three complex and interdependent goals, namely, lessening the impact of climate change, fighting poverty, and ensuring respect for human dignity. Promoting the 2030 agenda, which the former Secretary General called the road to dignity, with a compelling and consistent narrative of human rights and dignity, Pope Francis could not have expressed support for this project in any better way. On the other hand, good intentions and solemn commitments are not enough. The present time invites us to give priority to actions which generate new processes in society so that we will bear fruit in significant and positive historical events. And this is why the Holy See itself has decided to merge 4 offices which in the past responded to various different needs in humanity, making it one with the name Dicastery for Integral Human Development, merging the office that hitherto took care of humanitarian assistance, the office which hitherto took care of medical and health situations, an office which hitherto took care of migration and people on the move, an office which formerly took care of issue of human rights and dignity of people. These have been merged to consistently take care of the needs we're talking about. And so the future demands of us critical and global decisions in the face of a worldwide conflict which increase the number of excluded and those in need. And the implementation of the SDGs represent an opportunity to rediscover how creative and effective multilateral and multi-stakeholder activities can be when guided by a common vision and motivated by a moral and a present imperative. Without the recognition, then, of certain incontestable natural and ethical limits, and without the immediate implementation of those pillars of integral human development, the ideal of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war and promoting social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom risks becoming an unattainable illusion. So good governance and all the political instruments for the maintenance of peace and security for all are indispensable for the successful realization of the 2030 agenda. The realization, my dear friends, of the SDGs call for all stakeholders to exercise an effective, practical, and constant will. The wide-ranging Universal 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals falls on fertile soil here in Geneva, where the very many offices of the UN are found, and where the ability and capability of merging and working together is more easily realizable. The SDGs place the interdependence of all development actors, governments, civil society, and private sector, development banks, and of course the UN at the heart of their achievements. And so the 2030 Agenda aims to avoid issues being dealt with in isolation, in which one UN agency takes charge of the activities towards a given goal. Rather, it encourages multi-sectorial approaches to the issues. And so, dear friends, looking at the challenges of our times, the SDGs are the common instrument for a shared solution, with we as institutions, as states, and as faith-based organizations, as individuals, have still the opportunity to choose between helping each other achieve these goals or to miss them, failing everyone by himself. And so, this morning, introducing to you the merger at the instance of Pope Francis of the 4 offices of the Vatican is a signal of how the Holy See hopes that multi-sectorial approaches, all coming together and working together, can help us all achieve this goal. And with this, the Holy See pledges its support to all of you, UN agencies over here, towards the realization of the development goals, and we wish everybody great success in this endeavor. Thank you for your kind attention.